Hey, yo, Pro Wrestling Podcast listeners, welcome to the show where we don't sing it, we bring it. Help us out and click subscribe to show your support. Make sure to follow us on our Discord community and make sure you stop by www.tsj101sports.com. Pro Wrestling Podcast is the official wrestling podcast of TSJ Sports, but it's not just wrestling. Football, baseball, hockey, basketball, you name it, all your sports needs at tsj101sports.com. Guys, are you sick and tired of dropping $60 to $100 for the latest and greatest wrestling video game? Stop immediately and go to Wrestler Unstoppable, available exclusively through Facebook. Create a wrestler, sign contracts, get involved in storylines, headline a pay-per-view, even build your own corporation from the ground up, all included in Wrestler Unstoppable, available now to all Facebook users totally free. If you want to become a member of the Pro Wrestling Podcast family, you want your name in the shout-outs like our buddy Mike in Lansdale, our #1 Patreon, then go to our Patreon page at patreon.com/Pro Wrestling Podcast and sign up today. And don't forget, we have loyalty rewards. Anyone who contributes $15 a month, you're going to get a shot to co-host an episode with me of one of our live shows. And our $7.50 a month contributors, we're going to put your name in a drawing to also get an opportunity to co-host an episode with myself. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Pro Wrestling Podcast. If you have questions, comments, things you want us to talk about in a future episode, make sure you drop those off in the Pro Wrestling Sound Off line at 267-642-1160. It's a great way for you to come up with the things that you want us to delve into. It is a talk-to-text service. You talk it, they text it to me, and we'll get into that in a future episode. If you are going to leave comments on the show, please do so in whatever streaming feature you're using to get the show. Put it in the chat box there. We'll try to respond to those as well. Don't forget to check out the homepage of the Fro Wrestling Podcast at frowrestling.com and preview the topics coming to the Fro Podcast. And it's a great way to come up with those questions that you'd like us to talk about in a future episode. So, diving into this week's show, I want to talk about something that just blew my mind. Wade Barrett, who, for those of you who've been following along with all the different territories lately, Wade Barrett disappeared from WWE a few years ago and recently resurfaced in the NWA when he was on NWA Power doing commentary work. And now, since the COVID shutdown, really Wade Barrett has focused most of the last several years on his acting career. However, this week, Wade Barrett will be a guest announcer on WWE NXT. Now, this is a one-time deal, but I suspect that this is essentially a tryout to see if they can bring him on in a more permanent role. And I think if you have listened to any episodes of the NWA Power episodes, they have been fantastic, and he has done great work. I think this could be a huge acquisition for WWE. Now, I know some people are like, oh, it's just another wrestler. It's not. He brings a very different feel to the broadcast booth, and he sounds very authentic and exciting. And we kind of need something like that, almost to temper the persona that Mario Ranallo puts on when he's going over the top crazy on every move and every big dive. This is a person who could bring some legitimacy to the booth, and it'll be interesting to see how they intertwine him with the other people they already have there. Now, there's speculation already that this could lead to a shakeup in the announce teams across the other brands. I don't know if that's true or not, but it's something we definitely need to keep our eyes on, and it could be big for the NXT brand. Speaking of NXT, a lot of conversation this week about Keith Lee debuting on Raw, leaving NXT after losing the NXT Championship to Karrion Kross, and how his reign in NXT as champion was so short. I get it. I understand that. But let's be honest here. Keith Lee was a guy who you could have debuted on the main roster to begin with. He didn't have to go to NXT at all. He's that good. He always has been that good. So them moving him to Raw, I have no problem with that. Give the belt to somebody else and move on. However, when you debut a new character who's going to monopolize one of your top babyface spots, one of the worst things you can do is change his ring gear so that it looks like he's wearing a skirt in the ring, and then change his entrance music so that people can't identify and give him the big pop. Think back the last couple years, right? If you think about When Shinsuke Nakamura debuted on SmackDown, the pop that he got from the first chord was insane. When you see any major debut, whether it was Sami Zayn, Kevin Owens, anybody, the music is immediately identifiable and it makes that person an instant draw on the brand. And that's what we needed for Keith Lee. And instead, WWE gives him new music, which sounds awful. Now, don't get me wrong. I understand why, and some people don't, so I'll explain it to you. They are trying to get rid of the tracks that were created for them by their previous recording group that they were making all their entrance music with. The premiums they pay for things and such weren't business savvy, so they've moved on and they're recording new music in a different manner, and that's why they're trying to get rid of all the previous entrance music, and that makes business sense. But when you're going to debut a new character on Raw, what you should have done is debuted his new music back in NXT when he won the championship or something, so that a few weeks later when he comes to Raw, you already are familiar with it. You've brought it into your mind. It's a part of your conscience. You're like, oh, that's Keith Lee as soon as you hear it. Otherwise, putting him in a main event feud with Randy Orton to start with is fantastic. He deserves that spotlight. Keith Lee could be a transcendent player. He is a top-notch athlete. He is not the best promo. I was watching Raw, and my wife watched it with me, and she was thoroughly floored with how unimpressive he was with his promo skills. But I don't know in the entirety of my wrestling fandom, with the exception maybe of either Bam Bam Bigelow or Big Van Vader, I don't know if I've ever seen anybody as athletic at his size as Keith Lee. So WWE can do a lot with him, but they need to be careful in how they're doing this because you don't want to upset or rock the boat too much, and you want to make sure he gets over. Now, speaking of Raw, and one of the big controversies of the week is all the imagery in the background that people were trying to slip into the show. For those who don't know, there was a person who posted a Klan image. Who in their right mind does that? To me, that should come under there should have been a disclaimer by WWE that if you agreed to participate in this, that you were opening yourself up to litigation if you did something stupid like this. If you can't be a fan and just be a fan, you don't belong at the show. Now, there's another guy who put up a picture of Chris Benoit, the last known picture of Chris Benoit prior to that horrible, tragic incident in his home where he took the lives of his wife and son and then took his own life. And that's sad. But at least it's wrestling related. Now, there are people who think that Benoit belongs in the Hall of Fame. We can debate that another time. But the reality is that WWE need to do a better job of policing. There was a guy on Raw in the background in Thunderdome who was doing one of those, fictional murder scenes. How does that get onto television? When you call into a radio show, heck, if you call into my show at some point when we're doing a live episode, there's a certain amount of seconds that we have a buffer, that we can make sure if you say or do something crazy or inappropriate, we can edit those things out. Every radio station has that. Why was WWE not using the foresight to think, we might want to have, say, a 10-second review time and have people watching the screen to prevent something like this from happening? Absolutely ridiculous. And the people who did it, you're idiots. You're morons. I don't throw out trash talk often on this show, but whoever the disgusting people are who are putting things up like that and soiling a product that already needs all the help it can get, this is not helping. You're an idiot. You're a moron. You took a seat from somebody else who could have been present at the Thunderdome experience, and you took away their 10 minutes of fame because you want to do something really stupid. So I hope WWE puts in a much more stringent policy going forward for how people are going to be able to participate in the Thunderdome experience. I'm going to move past WWE for a second just because it annoys it annoys me so much that these people are absolutely ridiculous. Moving on to Eric Rowan, former WWE superstar, released earlier this year due to the COVID cuts. They were asking, we haven't seen him anywhere. And the question has been that has he received any offers? And it looks like right now that he's waiting for things to open back up, and he wants to try a few different places. He mentioned New Japan. He mentioned Ring of Honor. He mentioned the NWA, and of course he mentioned AEW. Now, as a fan, I have no problem with him going to AEW. My concern there is Brody Lee is there and in a great prominent role. I think bringing him there would be a bad idea. However, Ring of Honor, the NWA, either one of those would be a fantastic option for him. The concern there is the NWA doesn't pay nearly enough money. That's part of the reason Thunder Rosa, the AEW, called the owner of the NWA, Billy Corgan, the lead singer of Smashing Pumpkins, and got permission to use Thunder Rosa for the women's championship match at All In, or All Out, whatever, because they needed a legitimate female challenger for their championship. But that speaks to how low quality the AEW women's division is right now, and it also speaks to how desperate the NWA is to keep their talent, that they allow their people to appear on another company's show, because right now NWA talents are frustrated. They're not getting paid very much money, and they want to be able to earn a living, and AEW is offering that opportunity. And the reality is, the NWA better buck up, start paying some more cash, and get back to doing shows, or a lot more people are going to be leaving. Ring of Honor would be a great solution for Eric Rowan. I would have no problem with that. I think he actually would add more legitimacy to Ring of Honor. And I think that would be a great place for him to go. Or Impact. I mean, he didn't mention Impact, which surprised me a little bit. But I think Impact might be the best place for him to go. I could see him in a feud with Madman Fulton right now. I think would be a great idea. Want to touch on Booker T's comments a little bit here, where he spoke about Renee Young's departure from WWE, which he obviously appreciates her, and everybody who's a fan of WWE does. But the question and the conversation came up about whether or not she'll be inducted into the Hall of Fame. Now, without going into what Booker T's opinion is, I'm just going to give you mine, because I'm having a really tough time understanding WWE's Hall of Fame. Okay, people who have listened to this show for an extended period of time, they know that I have a problem with certain people going in and certain people not. For example, why is Coco Beware and why is Hillbilly Jim and people like that in the WWE Hall of Fame, yet we have to fight and petition and beg, and it took till now for the British Bulldog to be given an honor? We're talking about Renee Young, who spent 5, 6, 7, 8 years, whatever it is, in WWE. But in reality, yes, she's the first female to be a full-time announcer on Raw. That's cool. But there's been a lot of announcers on Raw. Is it just because she was the first? That doesn't mean she was the best. It just means she was the first. She was the first woman to host a WWE talk show with Talking Smack and things like that. I get it. All those things are awesome. But it doesn't necessarily make you Hall of Fame worthy. However, as much as I'm going to sound like an idiot for saying this, I have no problem putting her in if Coco Beware is in there. I have no problem putting her in if Hillbilly Jim is in there. I would have a problem with her being there if there are other wrestlers and other talents and other announcers who aren't in yet who deserve it much more. So I think it should be years down the road before she gets in. And before she gets in, people like Joey Styles have to be in. Paul Heyman has to be in. Be honest with you, I know it's going to sound really strange, but Vince McMahon himself needs to be in his own Hall of Fame as an announcer. People often forget how good of I know some people hated his announcing style. I loved his announcing style. He always had energy. He had a charisma about him. Even if you hated hearing his voice, he had that. And for anybody to say he didn't, they obviously have short-term memory or long-term memory loss, because he absolutely did have that. He brought it every time he took the booth. You don't have to love the guy, but you don't have to lie about it either. He was a solid contributor. So before she goes in, Gordon Soley absolutely has to be in the Hall of Fame. And Lance Russell, and even people like Eric Bischoff or, Tony Schiavone, people like that need to be in the Hall of Fame before Renee Young, because their contributions spanned such a larger period of time and during sometimes much more important periods of history, like the Monday Night Wars. So yes, I think at some point she'll get in. I hope it's not until all those people and several others that I'm not even mentioning get in, because they deserve it before she does. And lastly, a huge championship match announced for next week on Impact Wrestling. The match is, you're going to get to see Eric Young and Eddie Edwards for the Impact Wrestling World Championship. And I know they've been building this for weeks, and it's a great match. I can't wait to see it. And the reason I'm bringing it up is not because I want to toot the horn of Impact Wrestling for being the greatest organization in the world. Clearly they're not. But what they do is they give talent an opportunity. Eric Young is an incredible worker. He's one of the best workers in the business, and I mean that. He has never been given an opportunity outside of Impact Wrestling with his short run as the world champion, never been given a chance to really just go out and do what he does. He returns to Impact Wrestling, they put him in a main event program, and he's delivering on camera. He's believable, he's marketable, he is a great, great heel right now. WWE had him in Sanity, and they had an opportunity to make them an incredible force. That faction could have been in the ring with the Wyatt family, could have been in the ring with the Shield, and people would have bought it because it was built up really well. And then everybody has to go mess with things when people get to the main roster. They destroy Sanity. No member of Sanity has done anything of importance really since, certainly not on the level of success they had when they were in Sanity, and it's just a wasted opportunity. Now he's back with Impact Wrestling where they know how to use his skills and his talents, and that's sad that Impact Wrestling knows how to maximize Eric Young better than WWE. The small time can out design storylines around talent better than the big time. That is pathetic. Now, I'm not comparing it to AEW. Obviously, he's never been there, but I will say this. When you look at AEW's roster and what they've done with their people, they seem to find a way to maximize people's skill set as well. Let's be honest. Before AEW, did any of you know who Butcher and the Blade were? They're incredible. Did anybody know who half of these members of the Dark Order were? Of course not. They're incredible. Anybody know who a bunch of people on their show were? Of course not. They're incredible. Sammy Guevara, no matter what your opinion of him is about his, past indiscretions about women, Sammy Guevara is an incredible talent. He would never have seen the limelight in WWE. He'd have been down in the bottom of the mid-card, just like people like Cedric Alexander and Mustafa Ali and several others. That's what he'd have been doing in WWE if he even made it that far. AEW, he's a main draw, having a prominent feud with Matt Hardy, being a part of a huge faction. AEW gets it. Impact Wrestling gets it. Ring of Honor gets it. New Japan Pro Wrestling is the only company I've ever seen where you could take somebody, a big star like Kenny Omega, see him leave the company to go AEW, and literally that same show create a brand new star to lead the Bullet Club and instantly have success. Instantly. That's what happens every time they transition a new leader of the Bullet Club. And that's what happened when Jay White took over. Let's be honest, Kenny Omega left, and they didn't miss a beat. Jay White picked up where he left off. Jay White wasn't a main event star before Kenny Omega left. They made a star instantly. Why can the biggest company in the world not do that? Absolutely ridiculous. So, and I saw there was a quote online this week from Ryback talking about a conversation he had with Triple H about various topics, and part of the conversation was Triple H telling him John Cena was the last major breakout star that WWE was going to create. And I wonder what that's all about. Is that because Cena left you to go to Hollywood, so now you don't want to build anybody too much because they'll leave you? Well, you're an idiot. Because if you add up the dollars you made while John Cena was in WWE, I'd make $1 million of them every time I got the opportunity. Take the money when they leave, you move on to the next one and create another star. Your job is to create stars of the future, not to worry about where they're going to go later. Take your 5-6 years, run them into the ground, market the snot out of them, make them premium attractions for your brand, and if they choose to leave, so be it. How many actors do you think you're going to create in WWE? A few? Certainly not. You're not going to get a Rock or a John Cena every day of the week. And John Cena, I'm still not sold on him as a great actor. The Rock, yes, absolutely. That's why he's the number one box office draw in the country, in the world. But John Cena's not there yet. He's doing what he wants to do because he's getting older. His body's not the same as it was 20 years ago, and he's making good money doing it. If somebody else comes into your company and you build them up to be a star and they go do that, more power to them. Stop squashing talent because you're afraid they might leave. Build legitimate main event stars so people can start having experiences like they did with Hogan and Andre, Hogan and the Warrior, Hogan and Savage. Notice I'm saying Hogan a lot. Hogan was a main draw. Savage, main draw. Giant, Andre the Giant, main draw. WCW, Ric Flair. We'll never see somebody on the level of Ric Flair again because WWE is too afraid they'll go leave. Shawn Michaels, John Cena, Randy Orton, people like that. We're not going to create any more of those. Why? Because they might leave. We don't want to create any upper echelon characters. That's insane. That's just my take. That's all the time we have for this episode. Check back with us next episode. We'll run down all the latest wrestling news and rumors. Special thanks, as always, goes out to bensound.com and purpleplanet.com for producing all the music and sound effects we use on our shows. Today's podcast sponsored in part by Beazle Games. Bringing a new friend to family game night is easy with sketchy people. Showcase your artistic side in this new game from Beazle Games by going to frowrestling.com and clicking the icon in the middle of the screen to pick up your copy today. And to alleyrepair.com. Contact Alley Repair today for servicing of all your classic skee-ball, pinball, and arcade game needs. If you're looking for your next career move, you're considering college, university life, or you just need some formal training for your next career decision, go to our sister website at frolifeplanning.com for all your higher education needs, as Fro Life Educational Planning is for today, for tomorrow, and for life with Fro Life. I'm Fred Froelich, better known as Mr. Fro. I want to thank you so much for taking a few moments with us today. And if you're looking for more wrestling news and rumors, make sure you stop by www.tsj101sports.com for their latest articles. Until next time, take care, everybody. Have a great night.